The scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs as I stood at the edge of the clearing, my fingers trembling against the rough bark of an ancient oak. Around me, the annual gathering hummed with energy. Wolves from every pack in the northern territories had converged here, their voices rising in laughter and challenge, their bodies radiating the kind of confidence I'd never possessed. The moon hung full and heavy above us, casting silver light through the canopy, and I could feel its pull in my bones, that primal call that made every shifter's blood sing. I didn't belong here. The thought wasn't self-pity, just fact. At 23, I was still unmated, still packless in any way that mattered. My own pack, the Riverside Wolves, tolerated me because my father had once been a respected warrior, but his death 5 years ago had left me adrift. I was too quiet, too gentle, too human in my thinking. My wolf was small, pale as winter frost, and when I shifted, I felt more like an apology than a predator. Elena. The voice made me flinch. Cassian, my pack's beta, approached with that mixture of pity and impatience I'd grown accustomed to. His dark eyes swept over me, the simple dress I wore, my blonde hair falling loose instead of styled like the other females. You need to circulate. The Lycan King will be making his selection soon. My stomach clenched. The selection. Every unmated female under 30 had been summoned here, ostensibly to celebrate the alliance between packs, but everyone knew the real reason. King Davian Stormcrest, ruler of all Lycans in the Western Territories, had lost his mate 2 years ago in an attack that nearly destroyed his pack. The council had been pressuring him to choose again, to secure his bloodline, to show strength. I'd seen him only once, from a distance. He was everything I wasn't, powerful, commanding, his presence so intense it made the air itself seem to bend around him. His wolf was legendary, black as midnight, and twice the size of any normal shifter. They said he could kill with a glance, that his rage after his mate's death had left him cold and unreachable. I don't think he'd... I started, but Cassian cut me off. It doesn't matter what you think. You're here, you're unmated, and you'll present yourself like everyone else. Our pack's reputation depends on it. He paused, his expression softening slightly. Look, I know this isn't easy for you, but you're still one of us. Act like it. He left before I could respond, and I stood there feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on my shoulders. Around the clearing, females preened and postured, their wolves close to the surface, emanating strength and fertility and all the things a king would want. I caught snippets of conversation, speculation about who he'd choose, excitement about the possibility of becoming queen, whispered gossip about his coldness, his grief, the way he'd rejected every female the council had pushed toward him over the past 2 years. I should have felt relief that someone like me would never catch his attention. Instead, I felt hollow. The crowd suddenly shifted, voices dropping to hushed murmurs. I didn't need to see to know he'd arrived. I could feel it, that overwhelming presence that made my wolf whimper and press close to my consciousness. The crowd parted like water, and then I saw him. Davian Stormcrest stood at the center of the clearing, and the word king suddenly made perfect sense. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his body radiating lethal grace, even in stillness. Dark hair fell to his collar, and his face was all sharp angles and harsh beauty. A warrior's face, a leader's face. But it was his eyes that caught me. Even from 20 feet away, I could see they were the color of storm clouds, gray and turbulent and utterly empty of warmth. He wore simple black clothing that somehow made him look more dangerous, more other than any ceremonial garb could have. His beta stood beside him, a man nearly as large, with auburn hair and a scar across his jaw, and several other high-ranking wolves flanked them. But Davian stood apart, isolated even in the crowd, and I recognized that loneliness. I'd lived with it my entire life. The selection will begin, his beta announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. The king will walk among you. If he stops before you, you will meet his eyes. If he speaks to you, you will answer. This is tradition, and it will be honored. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to slip away, to disappear into the trees, but Cassian was watching me from across the clearing, his expression warning me not to dare. So I stayed, pressing myself against the oak's trunk as if I could merge with it, become invisible. Davian began to move through the crowd. Females straightened, tilted their heads to expose their throats in a show of submission and availability, let their wolves shine through their eyes. He barely glanced at them. His expression remained distant, disconnected, as if he were performing a duty he found distasteful. He stopped occasionally, once before a tall brunette from the mountain pack, once before a fierce-looking warrior female with scars on her arms. But each time, after a moment of consideration, he moved on. I watched him approach my section of the clearing and felt my body lock up with anxiety. I dropped my gaze to the ground, making myself as small as possible, hoping he'd pass by without noticing me at all. My wolf stirred restlessly, confused by my desire to hide when every instinct should have been pushing me forward. The sounds of the gathering seemed to fade. I became aware of footsteps, of breathing, of a presence so intense it made my skin prickle with awareness. I kept my eyes down, studying the moss at my feet, counting the seconds until he'd move on. The footsteps stopped, directly in front of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to look up, but terror held me frozen. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant sound of wind through leaves and the pounding of my own heart. "Look at me." His voice was deep, rough, holding an edge of command that my wolf instantly responded to. My head lifted before I could stop myself. And then I was staring into those storm-gray eyes. Up close, he was devastating, not beautiful. Beautiful was too soft a word. He was harsh angles and controlled power, and the grief that lived in his eyes was so profound it made my chest ache. For a moment, we just stared at each other, and I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Then his expression hardened into something like disgust. "What's your name?" he asked, though his tone suggested he didn't truly care. "Elena." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Elena Whitmore, of the Riverside Pack." His gaze swept over me, clinical and cold, taking in my simple dress, my loose hair, the way I stood with my shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. I saw the exact moment he dismissed me. His lip curled slightly, and he started to turn away. "Your Majesty," someone called out. One of the council members, an elderly wolf with white hair and calculating eyes. "Surely you'll give each female a fair consideration." Davian stopped. For a moment, tension rippled through the clearing, and I sensed how close he was to unleashing the rage everyone said lived just beneath his controlled surface. When he spoke, his voice was arctic. "I don't want you as my mate." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd expected rejection. But it was the way he said it, not just dismissive, but repulsed, as if the very idea of being bound to someone like me was offensive. Heat flooded my cheeks, and I heard gasps and murmurs ripple through the crowd. He turned away fully then, moving on to the next female, leaving me standing there with those words echoing in my head. "I don't want you as my mate," said not privately, not gently, but in front of everyone, spoken by a king to a nobody. Cassian appeared at my side moments later, his hand gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Nothing, I didn't—" My voice broke. "I didn't do anything." "Well, you embarrassed our pack. The king doesn't just—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Stay here. Don't draw any more attention to yourself." He left, and I stood there feeling tears prick at my eyes, hating myself for the weakness, for caring about the rejection of a man I didn't even know. Around me, the selection continued, but I couldn't focus on it. I just kept hearing those words, kept seeing the cold dismissal in his eyes. The night wore on. Eventually, Davian made his choice, the warrior female, strong and scarred and everything a king would need. The crowd erupted in cheers, and I watched as she stepped forward, pride radiating from every line of her body. He looked at her with that same empty expression, and I wondered if he felt anything at all anymore, or if grief had hollowed him out completely. As the celebration began in earnest, I finally managed to slip away into the shadows of the forest. My wolf pushed at me, wanting to run, wanting to escape the humiliation and the pain. I was about to shift when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a whisper of movement that set every instinct on edge. I turned, peering into the darkness between the trees. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then shapes began to emerge from the shadows, figures that moved wrong, that smelled of decay and dark magic. Rogues, not the normal kind, the lone wolves who'd left their packs. But something worse. Something corrupted. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness. And as they advanced toward the clearing, toward the celebrating, distracted crowd, I realized with horror that this was an attack. A planned massacre during the one night when every pack's guard was down. I opened my mouth to scream a warning, but one of them was already moving, impossibly fast, its hand clamping over my mouth as it dragged me backward into the trees. The creature's grip was iron, its fingers digging into my jaw as it hauled me deeper into the forest. Panic exploded through my chest, white-hot and blinding, but years of being overlooked had taught me something valuable: how to survive when you couldn't overpower. I went limp in its grasp, letting my full weight drop, and the sudden shift made it stumble just enough for me to twist my head and sink my teeth into the soft flesh of its wrist. It howled, a sound too guttural to be human or wolf, and released me. I hit the ground hard, pine needles scraping my palms. But I was already rolling, already scrambling to my feet. My wolf surged forward, desperate to break free, but I forced her back. In wolf form, I'd be faster, but also more vulnerable. These things weren't normal rogues, and whatever corruption twisted them made them stronger than they should be. I ran toward the clearing, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my dress tearing on branches as I crashed through the undergrowth. Behind me, I could hear them. Multiple sets of footsteps, snarls that raised every hair on my body. I had to warn them, had to reach the gathering before. The night erupted in screams. I burst from the tree line to find chaos. The corrupted rogues had attacked from multiple sides, their red eyes blazing in the moonlight as they tore into the celebrating crowd. Wolves shifted mid-stride, the air filling with the sound of tearing fabric and transforming bone. The scent of blood hit me, copper and sharp, mixing with the acrid smell of dark magic that clung to the attackers. "Elena!" Cassian's voice cut through the mayhem. He stood in his half-shifted form, fur rippling across his shoulders, fighting off two of the creatures. "Get to the center! Get to the king!" The center. Where Davian stood. I could see him even through the pandemonium. A massive black wolf, larger than any other, moving with lethal precision as he ripped through the attackers. His chosen mate fought beside him, her brown wolf fierce and capable, but they were being overwhelmed. For every corrupted rogue they killed, two more seemed to emerge from the forest. I should have shifted, should have fought. But my wolf was small, weak, useless in a battle like this. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I observed. I watched the patterns of attack, the way the corrupted rogues moved in coordinated groups, the way they seemed to be focusing their assault on one specific area. The king. They weren't just attacking randomly. They were trying to reach Davian, to kill him, and everyone else was just an obstacle in their way. My mind raced. Why? Why target him specifically? And then I remembered the stories, the whispers about his mate's death 2 years ago. Not just an attack, an assassination. What if this was the same enemy, coming back to finish what they'd started? One of the creatures broke through the defensive line, heading straight for where Davian fought. He didn't see it. Focused as he was on the 3 rogues he was already battling, his chosen mate was separated from him, pinned down by 2 more attackers. No one was watching his flank, I didn't think. Didn't let myself consider how foolish it was. I just ran. The corrupted rogue was mid-lunge when I slammed into its side. I wasn't strong enough to knock it down, but I disrupted its trajectory enough that its claws caught only air instead of the king's exposed throat. It rounded on me with a snarl, red eyes fixing on mine with inhuman rage, and I knew I'd just signed my own death warrant. But I'd bought Davian 3 seconds. 3 seconds for him to register the threat, to turn, to eliminate the attacker with one powerful strike. The creature fell, dissolving into ash and dark smoke. And then those storm-gray eyes were on me. Even in wolf form, his fury was palpable. I didn't have time to process it. Another rogue came at me, and this time I couldn't dodge fast enough. Pain exploded across my ribs as claws raked through fabric and skin. I hit the ground gasping, tasting dirt and blood, my vision swimming. Above me, the creature raised its arm for a killing blow. It never landed. Davian's massive form crashed into the rogue, jaws closing around its throat. The fight was brief and brutal, ending with more ash drifting on the wind. Then he was standing over me, his wolf form radiating protective aggression toward everything around us, and I realized with dizzying confusion that he was guarding me. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Gradually, the defenders gained the upper hand. The corrupted rogues that weren't killed retreated into the forest, their inhuman howls fading into the distance. The clearing fell quiet, except for groans of the wounded and the heavy breathing of exhausted warriors. I tried to sit up, but pain lanced through my side, sharp enough to make black spots dance across my vision. Warm blood soaked through my dress, spreading across the fabric in a dark stain. I pressed my hand to the wound, feeling the ragged edges of torn flesh, and fought down a wave of nausea. Davian shifted back to human form beside me, his transformation fluid and seamless. Someone threw him pants, which he pulled on without taking his eyes off me. Up close, covered in blood and ash, he looked even more dangerous than he had during the selection. But there was something in his expression now. Not warmth, exactly, but a sharp, focused intensity. You interfered. His voice was hard, accusatory. You were about to die, I managed, my voice thin with pain. I can handle myself, clearly. I couldn't stop the sarcasm that crept into my tone, even though I was talking to a king who'd already made clear how little he thought of me. Maybe blood loss was making me brave, or stupid. That's why you didn't see the rogue at your back. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. Before he could respond, his beta appeared, still half-shifted, blood streaking his face. Sire, we need to get you to safety. There could be more. The wounded are being tended to. Your safety takes priority. The beta's eyes flicked to me, something unreadable crossing his face. Her too, apparently, since she threw herself in front of you like an idiot. I started, but Davian cut me off. Can you walk? I tried to stand, made it halfway up before my legs gave out. He caught me before I hit the ground, his hands surprisingly gentle despite the anger still radiating from him. The moment his skin touched mine, something sparked. Not the mate bond, nothing that profound, but a recognition, a connection that made my wolf stir with interest and confusion. His eyes widened fractionally, and I knew he'd felt it too. Get the healer, he ordered, his voice rougher than before. Now. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and strange faces. They took me to a tent at the edge of the clearing, where an elderly woman with silver hair and gentle hands cleaned my wounds. The gashes were deep, but not fatal. I'd been lucky, she said, which seemed like a generous interpretation of events. She wrapped my ribs in bandages that smelled of herbs and magic, gave me something bitter to drink that dulled the worst of the pain. Through it all, I could hear voices outside the tent, Davian's, deep and commanding, issuing orders. His betas, asking questions about the attack. Others I didn't recognize, pack leaders demanding answers, council members trying to assert authority. But one voice cut through more clearly than the others. She's nobody, Davian, a weak wolf from a minor pack. Why are you wasting resources on her? The voice was female, sharp with annoyance. His chosen mate, I realized. The one he'd selected just hours ago, before everything went to hell. She saved my life. His response was flat, emotionless. She got in the way. There's a difference. She identified the attack pattern before anyone else. She recognized they were targeting me specifically. A pause. What are you saying? I'm saying she saw what trained warriors missed. Including you, Serena. The silence that followed was thick with tension. I closed my eyes, wishing I could disappear, wishing I'd just stayed hidden by the oak tree where I belonged. But the universe, apparently, had other plans. The tent flap opened, and Davian stepped inside, He'd cleaned up, changed into fresh clothes, but exhaustion lined his face. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before speaking. "What's your gift?" he asked abruptly. I blinked, confused. "My what?" Every wolf has something, a talent, a skill, an instinct stronger than the others. "What's yours?" I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the question. I didn't have a gift. I was the wolf who'd never been good at anything, who'd spent her whole life being overlooked and forgotten. But he was waiting, and something about the intensity in his eyes made me answer honestly. "I see patterns," I said quietly, "in behavior, in movement, in things. I notice what doesn't fit. That's how you knew they were targeting me." I nodded. They weren't trying to cause maximum damage. They were pushing toward one specific point, toward you. And the way they moved, it was coordinated, planned, like they'd rehearsed it. His expression shifted, something that might have been respect flickering in those gray eyes. "The council wants to dismiss tonight as a random attack. Rogues driven mad by dark magic, nothing more. But you don't think that." "No." He moved closer, crouching beside where I lay so we were at eye level. 2 years ago, my mate was killed in an attack remarkably similar to this one. Coordinated, targeted, covered up as random violence. I've spent every day since trying to find who was responsible. My breath caught. "You think it's the same enemy. I know it is. And now they've shown their hand again." His gaze intensified. "You saw things tonight that others missed. I need that skill. I need someone who can see patterns, who can help me figure out who's behind this before they strike again. You have advisors, warriors. Your mate is strong and brave and everything a Lycan queen should be." His voice was carefully neutral. "But she doesn't see what you see. None of them do." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost vulnerable in his voice. "I need your help, Elena." The way he said my name, not dismissively like before, but with actual recognition, sent a shiver through me. This was insane. He'd rejected me publicly just hours ago, had told me in front of everyone that he didn't want me as his mate. Now he was asking for my help, looking at me like I mattered. "What about Serena?" I asked. "Your chosen mate. She won't." "Serena is my political choice. The alliance the council needed." His jaw tightened. "But I make my own decisions about who serves in my inner circle, so I'm asking you, will you help me find the ones who murdered my mate and tried to kill me tonight?" I should have said no. Should have run back to my insignificant pack and my quiet, invisible life. But I looked into his eyes and saw the same loneliness I'd carried my whole life. Saw the desperate need for justice that consumed him, and I found myself nodding. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll help you." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or determination. He stood, offering me his hand. "Then rest tonight. Tomorrow, you come with me to the capital. We have work to do." He left before I could respond, and I lay there in the darkness, my ribs throbbing, my mind spinning. What had I just agreed to? What had changed in the space of a single violent night? Outside, I could hear Serena's voice, raised in anger. "You're taking her with us? That pathetic little wolf who can barely shift?" Davian's response was too quiet to hear, but the tone was final. The conversation ended. I closed my eyes, exhaustion finally dragging me under, and my last thought before sleep claimed me was that everything had changed. The king who'd rejected me now needed me. And somehow, that was far more terrifying than being invisible had ever been. The capital city of Silvercrest rose from the valley like something out of a dream, or a nightmare, depending on how you looked at it. Massive stone walls encircled the sprawling metropolis, their surfaces marked with ancient protective runes that glowed faintly in the dawn light. Beyond them, towers and buildings climbed toward the sky, a mixture of old-world architecture and modern necessity. At the heart of it all sat the palace, its dark spires reaching upward like claws. I watched it approach from the window of the car, my reflection ghostly in the glass. 3 days had passed since the attack at the gathering. 3 days of healing, of whispered conversations between pack leaders, of Serena's increasingly hostile glares whenever she thought no one was watching. Cassian had been furious when I'd told him I was leaving with the king, had accused me of overstepping my place, but there was nothing he could do. A king's request wasn't something you denied. Nervous? The question came from Davian's beta, who sat across from me. His name was Rowan, I'd learned, and unlike his king, he occasionally smiled. Not often, but occasionally. Terrified, I admitted, seeing no point in lying. He huffed something that might have been a laugh. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. The palace is complicated. Lots of politics, lots of wolves who'll see you as either a threat or an opportunity. I'm neither. You're whatever they decide you are. His amber eyes studied me thoughtfully. The king doesn't bring outsiders into his inner circle. Ever. Since his mate died, he's barely let anyone close. Yet here you are. He needs help finding who killed her. He's needed help for 2 years. Hasn't asked for it before. Rowan leaned back, his expression knowing. You're different somehow. He sees something in you. Before I could respond, the car door opened. We'd arrived at the palace gates, where guards in formal armor stood at attention. Davian emerged from the vehicle ahead of ours, his presence immediately drawing every eye. Serena appeared at his side, her hand possessively on his arm, her beauty sharp and intimidating in the morning light. She caught sight of me and her lip curled slightly, but she said nothing. She'd been like this since the gathering, coldly hostile, but careful never to openly challenge Davian's decision. I wondered how long that restraint would last. The palace interior was overwhelming. Marble floors stretched in every direction, covered in rich carpets that probably cost more than my entire pack's territory. Portraits of past kings and queens lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow as we walked. Wolves in formal attire moved through the corridors, bowing to Davian, their gazes sliding over me with curiosity and disdain. Your rooms are in the east wing, Rowan said, guiding me away from the main group. The king wants you settled before the council meeting this afternoon. Council meeting? To discuss the attack. Every pack leader affected by the gathering will be there, along with the king's advisors. He paused at a carved wooden door. You'll attend. Observe. Report anything unusual to the king afterward. My stomach twisted with anxiety. I don't know how to navigate these things. Then learn quickly. His voice wasn't unkind, just pragmatic. The king is putting considerable trust in you. Don't waste it. He left me alone in a suite of rooms that was larger than the entire house I'd grown up in. A massive bed dominated one wall, covered in silk sheets the color of midnight. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and a door led to a private bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. It was beautiful and luxurious, and made me feel completely out of place. I spent the morning bathing, changing into the simple but elegant dress that had been laid out for me. Someone had clearly anticipated my size. And trying to calm my racing heart, every time I closed my eyes, I saw those red-eyed rogues, felt the slash of claws across my ribs. The wounds were healing, accelerated by my wolf's natural abilities and the healer's magic, but phantom pain still ghosted across my skin. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find a young woman with auburn hair and friendly brown eyes. She wore the uniform of palace staff, but carried herself with more confidence than most servants I'd seen. I'm Mira, she said with a slight bow. I've been assigned as your attendant while you're here. The king thought you might need help navigating the palace. That's kind of him. I stepped aside to let her in, grateful for a friendly face. She smiled, moving to organize the contents of a trunk I hadn't noticed earlier. Apparently someone had packed clothes for me. The king isn't known for kindness these days. You must have made quite an impression. I saved his life. Sort of. That's not why he brought you here. She glanced at me, something shrewd in her gaze. The king has had his life saved before. He's never brought those wolves to live at the palace. I wanted to ask what she meant, but another knock interrupted us. This time it was Rowan, his expression grim. The council meeting has been moved up. The king wants you there now. My anxiety spiked. I'm not ready. You'll never be ready for palace politics. Come on. The council chamber was circular, with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. A massive table dominated the center, around which sat the most powerful wolves in the Western Territories. I recognized some from the gathering. Pack alphas, their betas, the elderly council member who'd challenged Davian during the selection. They all turned to look as I entered, and the weight of their collective judgment nearly made me turn and run. Davian sat at the head of the table, Serena on his right, an empty chair on his left. He gestured to it. "Elena, sit." The shock that rippled through the room was almost physical. That seat, I would learn later, had belonged to his dead mate. No one had occupied it in 2 years. Serena's face went white with fury, but she said nothing as I moved to take the chair. My legs felt like water, but I forced myself to walk steadily, to sit with my back straight, even though every instinct screamed at me to make myself small and invisible. "We're here to discuss the attack 3 nights ago," Davian began, his voice carrying absolute authority. 23 wolves injured, 5 dead. The attackers were corrupted rogues, their eyes indicating dark magic usage. This wasn't random violence, it was a coordinated assault. "Rogues attack," one of the alphas said dismissively, a broad-shouldered man with gray threading his dark hair. "It's unfortunate, but hardly unprecedented." These weren't normal rogues. Davian's eyes cut to me. "Elena, tell them what you observed." Every face turned toward me. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to speak. They moved in formation, military precision, and they weren't trying to cause maximum casualties. They were pushing toward one specific target. I met Davian's gaze. They were trying to reach the king. Silence fell over the chamber. Then the elderly council member, whose name I'd learned was Thaddeus, leaned forward. "And what qualifies you to make such observations, girl? You're unmated, packless in any real sense. Why should we trust your judgment?" The words stung, but I kept my voice steady. "Because I have no reason to lie. I have nothing to gain from this except the truth." "You have the king's favor to gain," Serena said coldly. It was the first time she'd spoken, and her voice dripped with contempt. "Convenient, isn't it? Make yourself seem useful, earn a place at court? I didn't ask to be here." I turned to face her, meeting her hostile gaze directly. "The king asked for my help. If you don't want me at this table, take it up with him. Not me." Her eyes flashed dangerously, but Davian spoke before she could respond. "Enough. Elena's observations align with my own. This was an assassination attempt, just like the one 2 years ago. Someone wants me dead, and they're using corrupted rogues to do it." "You've been claiming conspiracy for 2 years, Thaddeus said wearily. "Perhaps it's time to accept that your mate's death was simply tragic misfortune, and this recent attack was opportunistic violence during a large gathering." "No." Davian's voice was flat, final. "I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And if this council won't help me investigate, I'll do it alone." "You are not alone." Rowan spoke up from where he stood against the wall. "Your inner circle stands with you. As do I." The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. Every eye turned to me again, and I felt my face heat, but I didn't take them back. Davian looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded once. Acknowledgement and gratitude combined. The meeting continued for another hour, devolving into arguments about security measures and political alliances. I watched the dynamics, noting who supported Davian and who challenged him, who exchanged meaningful glances when they thought no one was watching. The pattern was becoming clear. The king had enemies, not just in the shadows, but here, in his own council. When it finally ended, the wolves filed out in clusters, their voices low and speculative. I started to follow, but Davian's voice stopped me. "Elena, stay." I turned to find him still seated, Rowan and Serena the only others remaining. Serena's fury was palpable, but she held her tongue as Davian spoke. "You did well in there. Better than I expected. I just told the truth. The truth is dangerous in this court." He stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the training grounds below. "Most wolves here deal in secrets and manipulation. You don't. That's refreshing." Serena made a sound of disgust. "She's weak. She barely survived one attack. What use is she in an actual investigation?" "She sees what others miss," Davian said without turning. "That's more valuable than physical strength." "Is it?" Or are you just— She cut herself off, but the implication hung in the air. Replacing your dead mate. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Davian turned slowly, his gray eyes gone cold as winter ice. Finish that sentence, Serena. I dare you. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away first. Submission, however reluctant. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I spoke out of turn. You did. His voice was still cold. Elena stays. She has my protection and my trust. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to return to your pack. It was a dismissal, clear and cutting. Serena's face went pale, then red with humiliation. She swept from the room without another word, and the silence she left behind was heavy with tension. I should go, I said quietly. I've caused enough trouble. You've caused nothing. Davian crossed to stand before me, close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, evidence of 2 years of grief and sleepless nights. I meant what I said. You have my protection. No one in this palace will harm you. But they'll resent me. They already do. Let them. His hand rose, hovering near my face but not quite touching. You saved my life, Elena. You saw through the chaos to the truth beneath. I need that. I need someone I can trust. The vulnerability in his voice made my chest ache. This powerful king, feared and respected by everyone, was lonely, desperately, profoundly lonely, surrounded by people yet isolated by his crown and his grief. You barely know me, I whispered. I know enough. His hand fell away. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start investigating properly. I'll need your eyes. He left before I could respond, Rowan trailing after him. I stood there in the empty council chamber, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. 3 days ago, I'd been nobody. An invisible wolf at the edge of a crowd, expecting nothing, wanting only to survive. Now I sat in a dead queen's chair. Now I had a king's trust. Now I was at the center of a conspiracy that had already killed once and would surely kill again. I should have been terrified, and I was. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. A sense of purpose I'd never felt before. For the first time in my life, someone needed what I could offer, not my strength or my beauty or my bloodline, just my ability to see. As I made my way back to my rooms, I passed through corridors lined with portraits and history. The past kings and queens stared down at me, their painted faces stern and regal. I wondered what they would think of me, the weak little wolf who'd somehow ended up at the heart of their kingdom. I wondered what I thought of myself. In my suite, Mira waited with food and concern. You survived your first council meeting. That's something. Barely. I sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. They hate me. Serena especially. Serena hates anyone who gets close to the king. She thought being chosen as his mate would mean something, would give her power and influence. Mira poured wine into a crystal glass, handed it to me. Instead, he keeps her at arm's length and brings you to sit in Queen Isabel's chair. Of course she hates you. I didn't ask for any of this. Doesn't matter what you asked for, matters what you do with it. She studied me thoughtfully. The king trusts you. That's rare. Don't waste it. And it was the second time today someone had said those words to me. Don't waste it. As if trust was a finite resource. Something precious and fragile. I thought about Davian's eyes when he'd looked at me in the council chamber. The way he'd defended my presence, my value. He barely knew me, yet he'd given me more respect in 3 days than my own pack had given me in 23 years. I wouldn't waste that. Whatever came next, conspiracy, danger, the hostility of wolves more powerful than me, I would face it. Not because I was brave, but because someone finally believed I was worth something. And maybe, if I was very lucky, I'd start to believe it too. The attack came 6 days after my arrival at the palace. I'd spent those days shadowing Davian, learning the rhythms of court life, while helping him piece together fragments of evidence about his mate's death. We worked in his private study most evenings, surrounded by maps and reports, tracking patterns in rogue activity over the past 2 years. It was painstaking work, but I was good at it. Connecting dots others missed, seeing the shape of conspiracy beneath seemingly random violence. We'd grown comfortable with each other in those long hours, Not friends exactly, but something approaching trust. He'd begun asking my opinion on things beyond the investigation. Council matters, political alliances. And sometimes, late at night when exhaustion lowered his walls, he'd talk about Isabel. About how she'd laughed, how she'd challenged him, how her loss had carved him hollow. I never told him that I understood that hollowness, that I'd carried it my whole life for different reasons. Serena had made herself scarce, which should have been a relief, but instead set my instincts on edge. She was planning something. I could feel it in the way palace staff grew nervous when her name was mentioned, in the careful way Rowan watched the corridors. That morning, Davian had left before dawn for a meeting with Border Patrol leaders. Rowan had gone with him, along with most of his personal guard. The palace felt empty, echoing, and I'd retreated to the library to continue research on dark magic corruption, trying to understand what had twisted those rogues into red-eyed monsters. The first sign of trouble was the smell. Smoke, acrid and wrong, carrying an undercurrent of magic that made my wolf snarl in alarm. I dropped the ancient text I'd been reading and ran to the window. The east wing, my wing, was burning. Flames licked up the stone walls, spreading impossibly fast, too fast to be natural. People were screaming. I could hear them through the thick glass, see palace staff fleeing the building. My heart seized with panic. Mira had been in my rooms, helping organize the research notes we'd accumulated. If she was still there, I ran. The corridors were filling with smoke, making my eyes water and my lungs burn. Guards rushed past me toward the fire, carrying buckets of water that would be useless against magical flames. I fought against the tide of fleeing bodies, pushing toward the east wing even as every instinct screamed at me to run the other way. Elena! Someone grabbed my arm. One of the guards, his face smudged with ash. You can't go that way. The king gave orders. You're to evacuate immediately. Mira's in there, my attendant. The staff have been evacuated, not all of them. I can smell her scent. She's still... I wrenched free of his grip and ran before he could stop me. The heat hit me like a wall when I reached the east wing. The flames had spread with supernatural speed, devouring tapestries and furniture, turning the beautiful corridors into an inferno. I shifted partially, letting my wolf's senses sharpen, following Mira's scent through the smoke and chaos. I found her in a collapsed section of hallway, pinned beneath a fallen beam. Her face was pale with pain and terror, blood streaking her temple. When she saw me, her eyes widened. Elena, no, get out of here. It's a trap. What? I crouched beside her, trying to lift the beam. It was impossibly heavy, and the fire was closing in. The fire. It started in your rooms. Someone set it. And then the explosions. She coughed, smoke filling her lungs. They wanted you dead. When you didn't die, they sealed the exits. They're waiting for... Movement in the smoke cut her off. Figures emerged from the flames, unaffected by the heat, their eyes glowing that same corrupted red I'd seen at the gathering. Not rogues this time. They moved too deliberately, wore the remains of palace guard uniforms. Corrupted from within, the conspiracy ran deeper than we'd thought. Well, one of them said, his voice distorted by whatever magic had twisted him. The little wolf who ruined our plans at the gathering. We thought burning you alive would be poetic. But this works too. I positioned myself between them and Mira, my partially shifted form all that stood between her and death. My wolf was small, weak compared to these creatures, but I'd be damned if I'd let them kill someone under my protection. Why? I demanded, stalling for time. Why target the king? Why kill his mate? The corrupted guard laughed. Because he's too strong. Because as long as Davian Stormcrest rules, our master's plans are threatened. Isabel was just the beginning. Tonight we finish it. Burn the palace, kill the king when he returns to save you, take control while the territories are in chaos. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about revenge or power. This was a coup, carefully planned and executed over years. You've failed, I said, hoping my voice sounded braver than I felt. The king isn't here. Your trap won't work. Oh, he'll come. The guard's smile was horrible. We've made sure of it. Sent word that you're trapped, dying. He's already on his way back, riding straight into our ambush. He stepped closer, heat radiating from his corrupted body. You really should be honored. You've only been here a week, yet he's willing to risk everything to save you. Makes killing you all the more satisfying. They advanced. And I knew I was out of time. I couldn't fight them. Not 3 of them. Not while protecting Mira, but I could buy time. Could give Davian a chance to. The wall exploded inward. A massive black wolf crashed through burning stone and timber, fury incarnate, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity that made the corrupted guards step back. Davian. He'd gotten here impossibly fast. Must have shifted and run the moment he'd heard. Behind him came Rowan, and a squad of loyal guards, their weapons drawn. The fight that followed was brutal and swift. Davian moved like death itself, ripping through the corrupted guards with a savagery that spoke of 2 years of pent-up rage finally unleashed. But more were coming. I could hear them in the smoke, sense them surrounding us. This wasn't just 3 guards. This was a coordinated attack, dozens of corrupted wolves converging on this location. "Rowan!" I shouted. "Get Mira out. Get everyone out. This is a trap for the king." Rowan hesitated, torn between duty to his king and saving the injured. Davian, still in wolf form, snarled something that sounded like agreement. Rowan cursed, but moved to lift the beam off Mira, hauling her onto his shoulders. "What about you?" he demanded. "I'm staying with him." The words were out before I'd thought them through. But once spoken, I knew they were true. I wasn't leaving Davian to face this alone. "You're insane." But Rowan was already moving, carrying Mira toward the collapsed wall where escape was possible. Davian shifted back to human form, his body covered in burns and cuts, but his eyes clear and focused. "You should go with them." Not a chance. I positioned myself at his back as the corrupted wolves began to close in. "You trusted me to see patterns, to help you find the truth. Well, here's the truth. They've been planning this for years. Corrupting your own guards, waiting for the perfect moment. They knew you'd come for me. They were right." He didn't look at me, his attention on the approaching threat, but his voice carried weight. "I would have torn through anything to reach you." My breath caught. There was no time to process what that meant, no time to examine the implications. The corrupted wolves attacked. What followed was chaos. Davian fought with lethal precision. But there were too many of them, and more kept coming. I couldn't match their strength, but I could do what I did best: observe, anticipate, warn him of attacks he couldn't see. We moved together, his power and my awareness creating a strange synergy. "Left," I shouted, and he ducked beneath claws that would have taken his head off. "Behind you," his voice, and I dropped as a corrupted wolf sailed over me, straight into his waiting jaws. But we were losing ground. The flames were spreading, the heat becoming unbearable. My lungs burned with every breath, and Davian's movements were slowing, exhaustion and injury taking their toll. Then I saw it, the pattern I'd been searching for without realizing. The way the corrupted wolves moved, the way they coordinated their attacks. They were being controlled, directed by someone, and that someone was there. I pointed to a figure standing in the shadows beyond the flames. Hooded, barely visible, but I could see the glow of magic around their hands, see the threads of power connecting them to the corrupted guards. Davian saw it too. For a moment, our eyes met, and I understood what he was going to do. "Cover me," he growled. Then he was running, shifting mid-stride into his massive wolf form, charging straight through the flames toward the hooded figure. The corrupted guards tried to intercept him, but I threw myself at them. Reckless, desperate, buying him seconds with my body since I had nothing else to offer. Claws raked across my shoulder, teeth caught my leg. Pain exploded through me, but I held on, held them back, gave Davian those precious seconds he needed. He reached the hooded figure. There was a flash of magic, a scream, and suddenly the corrupted guards collapsed. Just fell, like puppets with cut strings, the red glow fading from their eyes. The flames, too, began to die, the magical fuel that had fed them extinguished. I sagged against the scorched wall, my body screaming with pain, blood running warm down my arm and leg. Davian shifted back, dragging the unconscious hooded figure with him. When he pulled back the hood, I heard his sharp intake of breath. "Thaddeus, the elderly council member. He's been controlling them," I whispered, pieces clicking into place. "He killed Isabel. He's been trying to kill you, all to take control of the territories. Davian's voice was hollow with betrayal. He was my father's most trusted advisor. I grew up with him. And all this time, he couldn't finish. I understood. The conspiracy was worse than we'd imagined. Not external enemies, but wrought at the heart of his own court. Guards were flooding into the ruined wing now, led by Rowan. They took custody of Thaddeus, began the grim work of securing the other corrupted guards for interrogation. Healers appeared, trying to tend to Davian's wounds, but he waved them off. "Elena first," he ordered. "I'm fine," I lied, though standing was becoming difficult. "You're bleeding." He moved to support me, his hands gentle despite their strength. "You threw yourself at armed enemies to buy me time. That's not fine, that's—" He stopped, something raw in his expression. "That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. Or the stupidest. Maybe both." His voice softened. Why risk yourself like that?" I met his eyes, and the truth spilled out before I could stop it. "Because you matter. Because this kingdom needs you. Because—" I faltered, but his gaze held mine, demanding honesty. "Because I couldn't let them take you." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. Around us, the palace was in chaos. Guards shouting orders, healers tending wounded, the acrid smell of smoke and magic thick in the air. But in that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "I rejected you," he said quietly, "at the gathering. I said I didn't want you as my mate. I was cruel. You were honest. I'm not what a king needs. You're wrong." His hand rose to cup my face, careful of my injuries. "You're exactly what I need. You're brave and clever, and you see truth where others see only shadows. You saved my life twice now. You figured out the conspiracy when trained warriors couldn't. You stood beside me when you could have run." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. I was a fool at the gathering, blinded by grief, by duty, by what I thought a queen should be. I chose strength and politics when I should have chosen Davian. Serena's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She stood at the edge of the destruction, her face pale with shock, and something else. Anger, jealousy, fear. "The council is convening emergency session. They need you." His hand dropped from my face, but his eyes stayed on mine. "Later," he said softly. "We'll finish this conversation later." Then he was moving away, pulled back into the demands of kingship, leaving me bleeding and exhausted amid the ruins. But something had changed between us, something fundamental. Mira appeared at my side, bandaged but alive. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you to the healers before you collapse." I let her lead me away, my mind spinning. Thaddeus, the conspiracy, the corrupted guards. We'd won today, but how deep did the rot go? How many others were involved? And Davian. The way he'd looked at me. The things he'd almost said. I couldn't let myself hope. Couldn't let myself believe that a king and a nobody could ever. But the memory of his hand on my face, the intensity in his voice, kept playing through my mind as the healers stitched my wounds and gave me bitter medicine for the pain. The palace was saved, the conspiracy exposed, but I had a feeling the real battle was just beginning. The investigation that followed Thaddeus's arrest unraveled like a poisoned thread, revealing corruption that went deeper than anyone had imagined. 2 weeks passed in a blur of interrogations, council sessions, and tense standoffs as the full scope of the conspiracy came to light. Thaddeus hadn't worked alone. He'd spent years building a network of corrupted wolves, promising them power in a new regime once Davian was eliminated. Some had joined willingly, seduced by ambition. Others had been coerced, blackmailed, or twisted by dark magic until their minds were no longer their own. Isabel's death had been the first move in a long game. They'd made it look like a random rogue attack, counting on Davian's grief to make him vulnerable, distracted. When he'd instead thrown himself into finding the truth, they'd tried again at the gathering, a mass attack designed to look chaotic while targeting him specifically. I'd ruined that plan by seeing the pattern, by warning him. So they'd tried to eliminate me and trap him in one move. Burn the palace, kill the inconvenient little wolf who saw too much, And when the grief-maddened king came charging to the rescue, finish him too, they'd failed. But the cost had been high. 17 guards had been corrupted. 5 council members implicated. Entire packs had been infiltrated. The hearings were brutal, public, necessary. Davian presided over them with grim determination, his face carved from stone as former allies were revealed as traitors. I attended every session, sitting in that chair to his left, Isabel's chair, now apparently mine. Serena had stopped coming after the 3rd day, her position as chosen mate revealed as the political fiction it had always been. The mating ceremony had never taken place. The bond had never been sealed. She'd returned to her pack with whatever dignity she could salvage, and I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty about her humiliation, not when I saw what this conspiracy had done. Not when I understood how close they'd come to destroying everything. Through it all, Davian and I worked together, planning, strategizing, making sense of the chaos. We fell into an easy rhythm. I'd spot patterns in testimony, connections others missed, and he'd pursue them with relentless focus. Rowan joked that we functioned like 2 halves of the same mind, but there was truth beneath his teasing. Something had shifted between us the night of the fire, something neither of us had the time or courage to name, until tonight. The last of the hearings had concluded this afternoon. Justice had been served, harsh, necessary justice that would send shockwaves through the territories for years. The palace felt quiet now, almost peaceful, as if it could finally breathe after holding its breath for so long. I stood on the balcony outside my new rooms. They'd moved me to the west wing after the fire, to chambers that were somehow even more luxurious than before. The city spread below me, lights twinkling in the darkness, and above, the full moon hung heavy and silver. I thought I'd find you here. I turned to find Davian in the doorway. He'd changed from the formal attire he'd worn to the hearings into simple dark clothes, his hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked exhausted and relieved, and something else I couldn't quite name. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Too much quiet. My mind doesn't know what to do without a conspiracy to unravel. He moved to stand beside me at the railing, close enough that I could feel his warmth in the cool night air. I know what you mean. 2 years I've been hunting shadows. Now that we've found them, I feel... He trailed off, searching for words. Lost? Yes. He looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. But also found, strangely, because of you. My heart hammered against my ribs. Davian, let me say this. His voice was soft but firm. I need to say this while I have the courage. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When I lost Isabel, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Love, hope, the ability to feel anything beyond rage and grief. I went through the motions of being king, but inside I was hollow. He turned to face me fully. Then you stumbled into my life. This small, scared wolf, who should have been invisible but somehow saw everything, who saved my life when you should have run, who stood beside me when anyone with sense would have fled. I didn't do anything special, I whispered. You did everything. His hand rose to cup my face, just as it had the night of the fire. But this time there was no emergency to interrupt us. You solved a mystery that had consumed me for 2 years. You exposed corruption I was blind to. You risked your life, multiple times for a king who'd publicly rejected you. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You reminded me what it feels like to hope. Tears pricked my eyes. You gave me purpose, showed me I was worth something beyond being invisible. Elena. The way he said my name was almost reverent. You were never invisible. I was just too broken to see you. That moment at the gathering, when I looked into your eyes, I felt something. A connection, a recognition. It terrified me. So I lashed out, said cruel things because I wasn't ready to feel anything for anyone. And now, I barely breathed the question. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. You've become essential, my advisor, my friend, the person I trust above all others. But I want... He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his face. I want more than that. If you'll have me. If you can forgive what I said at the gathering. There's nothing to forgive. My hands rose to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my palms. You were grieving, protecting yourself. I understood that even then. I don't deserve you. You deserve to be happy. We both do. He pulled back slightly, just enough to meet my eyes. The council will object. They'll say you're too young, too weak, that you don't have the bloodline or the strength to be queen. Then maybe I shouldn't be queen. The words hurt to say, but I forced them out. I won't be the thing that destabilizes your rule. Not after everything He kissed me. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he feared I might break. But when I kissed him back, something ignited between us. 2 years of loneliness and grief meeting a lifetime of invisibility and longing, finding in each other something that felt like home. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine again. I don't want a queen the council approves of. I want you. Your brilliant mind, your courage, your compassion, everything that makes you who you are. They'll make it difficult. Let them. His voice held steel beneath the softness. I've spent 2 years being what everyone else needed me to be, making the choices duty demanded. Rejecting what I wanted for what I should want. His hands framed my face. No more. I choose you, Elena, not because you're strong in the traditional sense, but because your strength is different. Better. You see truth where others see only what they want to see. You stand firm when others would run. That's the kind of strength I need beside me. I'm still scared, I admitted. Of the responsibility, of failing you, of being happy, he asked gently. I'm scared too. It feels like betraying Isabel's memory. Even though I know she'd want me to move forward, it feels dangerous, like opening myself to loss again. He kissed my forehead. But you're worth the fear, worth the risk. We stood there in the moonlight, holding each other. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere, not despite my weaknesses, but because of everything I was. So what happens now? I asked eventually. Now we face the council together. Rowan will support us. He's been making pointed comments about my idiocy for the past week. That drew a small laugh from me. Some of the packs will object, but others will see the wisdom in choosing someone who helped save the kingdom. And honestly, he pulled back to look at me, a hint of his old authority returning. I don't particularly care what they think. You'll be my mate and my queen if you'll have me. Yes. The word was simple, but it carried everything. Yes, I'll have you. His smile transformed his face, chasing away the shadows that had lived there for so long. Then we'll make it official. Tomorrow, if you're willing. A proper mating ceremony, binding us in the eyes of the pack and the kingdom. Tomorrow? My eyes widened. That's fast. I've wasted enough time. His expression turned serious. I let fear and grief dictate my choices for 2 years. I'm done waiting. Unless you need more time? I thought about it. About the scared, invisible wolf I'd been just weeks ago. About the journey that had brought me here. Terror and violence and discovery and hope all tangled together. About this man who'd seen past his own pain to recognize something valuable in me. No, I said softly. No more waiting. The next day dawned clear and bright, the sun burning away the last traces of smoke that had lingered over the palace. Word spread quickly about the ceremony. Some wolves celebrated, others grumbled, but none openly challenged the king's decision, not after he'd just purged the kingdom of traitors. Mira helped me prepare, braiding my blonde hair with silver thread, and dressing me in a gown the color of moonlight. I barely recognized my reflection. I looked almost regal, almost like I belonged in this palace. You're going to be queen, Mira said, adjusting the drape of fabric across my shoulders. How does that feel? Terrifying. Impossible. Right, I met her eyes in the mirror. Thank you. For everything. You could have died in that fire, and it would have been my fault. It would have been Thaddeus's fault, she corrected firmly. You saved me, remember? Came back into a burning building when you should have run. That's what queens do. Protect their people, even at risk to themselves. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall, witnessed by pack leaders and council members, and what felt like half the kingdom. I walked down the long aisle on trembling legs, acutely aware of every eye on me, every whisper behind hands. But then I saw Davian waiting at the altar, dressed in formal black with silver wolf emblems at his shoulders, and nothing else mattered. The ceremony was ancient, beautiful, binding. We spoke the words that would link our lives, our wolves, our futures. When the officiant prompted us to seal the bond, Davian kissed me in front of everyone, not the gentle kiss from last night, but a claiming, a declaration. I felt the bond snap into place, golden and warm and unbreakable. His emotions flooded through the connection. Love, hope, determination, and underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that made my wolf purr with satisfaction. When we turned to face the crowd, his arm around my waist, I saw the range of reactions. Rowan grinning openly, some pack leaders bowing with genuine respect, others stone-faced with disapproval. The council members looking calculating, already planning how to use this for political advantage. Let them plan. I'd spent my life being underestimated. Let them continue to see me as weak, inconsequential. I'd learned that sometimes being overlooked was the greatest advantage of all. The celebration that followed was elaborate and exhausting. We danced and greeted well-wishers and navigated political conversations with practiced ease. Through it all, I felt Davian's presence through the bond, his steady confidence anchoring me when anxiety threatened. Late that night, finally alone in his chambers, our chambers now, he pulled me close and just held me. No words needed, just the comfort of physical presence and the warm glow of the bond between us. "Are you happy?" he asked eventually, his voice rumbling through his chest where my head rested. Yes. The truth of it surprised me. Scared and overwhelmed and completely out of my depth. But happy. Good. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "We'll figure out the rest together." And we did. The months that followed weren't easy. Some packs tested my authority, expecting weakness. They learned quickly that while I might not match them in physical strength, I could outthink them. I helped Davian rebuild the guard with uncorrupted wolves, implemented new security protocols, established a network of observers who reported directly to me, turning my gift for seeing patterns into a kingdom-wide intelligence system. The council grew to respect me, if not always like me. I proved myself repeatedly, solving problems they couldn't, seeing threats before they materialized. I became known not as the weak queen who'd stumbled into power, but as the strategic mind behind the throne. Davian and I grew into our partnership. He taught me strength, not the physical kind, but the kind that came from standing firm in your convictions. I taught him to see nuance, to consider perspectives beyond his own. Together, we were more than either of us could have been alone. Rowan became my closest friend and fiercest defender, Mira, my attendant and confidant. We built a new inner circle based on loyalty and trust rather than bloodlines and politics. And through it all, I never forgot where I'd come from. The invisible wolf at the edge of the clearing, certain she'd never matter to anyone. A year after the ceremony, I stood on that same balcony where Davian had first confessed his feelings. The city spread below me, peaceful and thriving, rebuilt from the damage of conspiracy and fire. Arms wrapped around me from behind, and I leaned back into Davian's warmth. "What are you thinking?" he asked. That a year ago, I would have laughed if someone told me this would be my life. I turned in his arms, that I'd be queen, that I'd be happy, that I'd be loved. Loved doesn't begin to cover it. His hand moved to rest on my still flat stomach, where new life was just beginning to grow. "You're everything, Elena, my mate, my queen, the mother of my child, my salvation." Tears pricked my eyes, the good kind this time. "You saved me too, gave me purpose, value, a place to belong." We saved each other. He kissed me softly. That's what partners do. I thought about the terrified girl I'd been at the gathering, about Davian's words that night, cold and dismissive. "I don't want you as my mate." How wrong he'd been, how grateful I was that fate, or the moon, or whatever force guided our lives, had given us a second chance. "I love you," I said, the words still feeling new and precious on my tongue. "I love you," he echoed. "My impossible, brilliant, beautiful queen." The moon rose above us, full and silver, blessing us with her light, and I knew, bone deep and certain, that this was where I was meant to be, not despite my weaknesses, but because of them, not in spite of being overlooked, but because invisibility had taught me to see what others missed. I'd been the wolf no one wanted, the one rejected in front of everyone, dismissed as worthless. Now I was queen, partner to a king, solver of conspiracies, protector of a kingdom. And most importantly, I was loved. Completely, fiercely, eternally loved. The girl who'd stood trembling by an oak tree was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who'd found her strength in unexpected places, who'd learned that sometimes the greatest power came not from dominance, but from seeing, from understanding, from having the courage to stand when others would run. I was Elena Stormcrest, queen of the Western Territories, mate to Davian, and I was finally and forever home.